Okay. Does she know that though?
Go ahead.
All right, everyone. Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Martha. And it's a real honor to spend a little bit of time with all of you to talk about mindfulness. So as Martha mentioned, I am a clinical psychologist. I was trained to become a psychotherapist, but near the end of my training to become a therapist, I realized that I wanted to really dive into how people could deal with, I guess what I'd call, at the time, I was very interested in what we call undifferentiated negative affect. So that's like a psychological term for when you just feel bad and you don't really know why, or you don't really have a name for it. It's just a feeling bad and wanting to make that stop. And in particular, I was interested because I was doing a lot of psychotherapy and research in the arena of addictions and alcoholism. And what we noticed was that when people relapse after having been sober or clean from drugs or alcohol, after having been addicted, often the relapse was based on one of two things. One was they just simply forgot how bad it was. They forgot how addicted they got. And it was almost like a blank mind, you know? So they would go through absolute heck. They would, you know, have massive destruction of their life. They might do rebuilding of their life and feel great for 6 months. And then someone would say, hey, you want a beer? And they'd be like, sure. Like they just completely forgot. They went unconscious. The second was that they would experience this undifferentiated negative affect, which is just feeling bad and not really having a name for it and not knowing why, except that it feels completely urgent to make it stop. And so people engage in behaviors that aren't so good for them when they feel like something's going on with them, that it's urgent, that it stop. The other thing we noticed about this difficult moment was it could be anything from losing a loved one, maybe the highest level of distress, all the way to, you know, I don't like the way my boss looked at me before I left for lunch. And both of those experiences would actually feel almost as urgent. And so they would engage in these behaviors. So I got really interested in that and started doing mind-body medicine research, which I've been doing now for the last 25 years. Primarily in the arena of mindfulness, but also in other practices that help people navigate life. Life meaning the good, the bad, the ugly, the blissful, the ecstatic, the agony, the ecstasy, the whole enchilada. And so now I'm acting as director of the Center for Mindfulness at the University of California, San Diego, UCSD, and also director of research at the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination there. I also do some work with a foundation leading their efforts. It's called the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, leading their efforts to help mental health care become more holistic, addressing more of the whole person. And so today I'm hoping that we can talk about some ideas and skills that might be immediately helpful when you're facing difficult moments, physically, emotionally, mentally, or situationally. And so the first thing I want to say is that mindfulness is different from relaxation. Sometimes we use the word meditation and relaxation synonymously, but mindfulness meditation is actually quite different. It can be relaxing, but it can also be distressing. It can be happy. It can be joyful. It can be peaceful. It can be annoying. It can be boring, just like life. And the purpose of mindfulness meditation is to help us learn how to navigate all of these ever-changing experiences we have in everyday life. There's nothing wrong with relaxation. It can actually be great for us mentally, emotionally, and physically, but it's different than mindfulness. So having said that, I think we will start with just a little bit of relaxation, and then we'll demonstrate the difference between that and mindfulness. So if you can take a moment to allow yourself to the extent possible, and this can be if you're having involuntary movements, this can be if you're having involuntary thoughts, involuntary emotions, in the presence of those things, to allow the mind and the body and the spirit to be sort of like a pond where the water is cloudy because the sediment is all stirred up. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes and take several deep breaths. And on every exhale, allow the sediment in the pond to begin to filter down to the bottom. In every exhale, imagining that a coil within you is loosening. If you continue to have body sensations or movements or mental activity or emotional activity, just bring your attention back to your breathing. Allow yourself to relax and let go. And allow your breathing to become full, all the way into your body and all the way out. So you can keep your eyes closed if you're in a safe place to do so, or if your eyes are opened, you can just allow your gaze to soften. And now we're going to move from that relaxation to mindfulness. So instead of trying to make anything happen, we're just going to observe everything that is happening. It's almost like you'll have an internal witness or an internal journalist who's just objectively reporting what's happening from moment to moment. No good, no bad, no attempt to change it. So first, notice what's happening in your breathing. Are you breathing shallowly or deeply, smoothly or roughly? Now you might notice that your breathing changes when you bring attention to it, but you're not necessarily trying to make it change. You're just noticing. And this noticing is not like a laser focus. It's more like a light observation, like a butterfly landing on a flower. Your attention lands on your breathing, allowing it to be exactly as it is, just paying attention to it from the beginning of the in-breath to the beginning of the out-breath, back to the beginning of the in-breath, and allowing your attention to ride the waves of your breathing. Now bring your attention to your body sensations. Notice if you are still or moving. Notice if you have pain or any areas of pleasantness or any areas that are neutral. Right now, we're just suspending judgment, not saying that anyone is bad or good. It's just what it is. Are you hot or cold? Are you hungry or full? What does your skin feel like? What does the air against your skin feel like? Letting everything be just as it is without resistance. And then we're going to move our attention to emotions and moods. How are you feeling right now? An emotion is usually more temporary and intense, whereas a mood is longer term and more of a contextual feeling. Are you feeling happy, angry, bored, content, irritated, love, sad, scared? Allow these feelings to be present no matter what they are. Just notice, aha, I see, that's what that's like. The word vipassana in the original language of Buddhism has been translated to mindfulness, but perhaps a more accurate translation is seeing clearly. Here you're just seeing clearly what you're feeling. Allowing it, not judging it. And finally, let's move to your mental process, your thinking. You may have a very clear mind right now where you're really only hearing the words that I'm saying, or you may have drifted completely off into a different thought process about what you're going to make for dinner tonight, or something that happened a few days ago, how the Padres are doing, could be anything. And just notice that you have this train of thought that sometimes is really loud and sometimes it's very quiet. Notice what you're thinking, how you're thinking. And if you get lost, you can always bring your attention back to your breathing. In the next few breaths, I'm going to stay quiet, and I'd just like you to notice what you're hearing, what you're seeing, even if your eyes are closed. Any taste, anything you smell. Notice your sensations for the next minute or so. Okay. So you might rub your hands together or blink your eyes a bit. Feel where you're sitting as you open your eyes. And then I'd love to hear in the chat if anyone has the desire to or ability to, anything you might have experienced. Hopefully noticing the difference between relaxation, which is really trying to change how you're feeling, how you're thinking, how your body feels, which is really healthy. Relaxation exercises are healthy, but mindfulness is especially specifically not trying to change anything other than your attention. The only thing you're trying to change in mindfulness is how you pay attention. So I welcome any questions or any thoughts throughout the whole time we're talking. In the meantime, I just wanted to share that the Center for Mindfulness, where I'm acting as director, is at UC San Diego and is part of the Centers for Integrative Health, which is home to 5 centers that are focused on integrative medicine, nutrition, mindfulness, education, integrative medicine. I did want to let you know that there are a couple of classes coming up. Even though the one yesterday just started, you can probably still join it. It's a self-compassion training for people who work in healthcare communities. And there's also an introduction to mindfulness that starts on October 27th. And that is on Thursdays at 1 p.m. So after this session, if you feel like you want to get more training in mindfulness, there's this October 27th class beginning on Thursdays by a great teacher, Renee Lewis, at our center. So let us know if you'd like to do that. So what is mindfulness? It's paying attention on purpose in a particular way. Paying attention on purpose in a particular way. And that way is moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness of your experience, meeting things as they are with kindness and curiosity. Now that just sounds so simple. It sounds so easy, but it actually takes a lot of practice. We are definitely not hardwired to, nor are we taught to simply be present with our moment-to-moment, moment-to-moment experience without judging it. In fact, we're trained to, and we're hardwired to evaluate every experience as I like it, I don't like it, I want it, I don't want it, it's good, it's bad. And then to crave the things we want or move towards them or try to grab them or make them stay, and then to avoid or move away from the things we don't want. So this is natural, this is part of being human. However, orienting our lives around that causes more suffering than the actual painful experiences in our lives. Orienting our lives around trying to get things to be the way we want them to be, to get people to be the way we want them to be, to get our internal experience to be exactly how we want it, and to avoid things that we don't want, or to try to make them stop or resist them or fight them, causes more suffering than the initial stressors. By the way, I'm happy to share this slide deck with you all. Jon Kabat-Zinn was someone who has been responsible for, in large part, bringing mindfulness into the healthcare system in the United States. And he wrote this book called Wherever You Go, There You Are, Mindfulness Meditation in Everyday Life. He started off with chronic pain patients who weren't receiving any relief from other forms of treatment. And even he was surprised to find that as he trained these patients who had this intractable chronic pain, they were not only finding some paradoxical relief of their pain by noticing it and allowing it to be there as opposed to resisting it, But there were other areas of their life that began to improve as well: mood, depression, anxiety, relationships. And so now there is mindfulness meditation taught in almost every major medical center in the developing world. And there are now over 10,000, if not more, articles doing research on mindfulness practice, showing consistently less depression, anxiety, and stress, greater resilience, less rumination. Some of you probably know what rumination is. It's kind of based on when a cow chews its cud. It's when we think about things over and over and over and over and over again, and usually in a negative way. And that's a real predictor of depression and anxiety. So there's less rumination through mindfulness, better emotion regulation. Also, physical benefits of really, this involves sitting and observing your experience about 20 minutes a day, every day. Improved immunity, reduced inflammation, lower blood pressure, less pain, changes in the brain, a shift in the default mode network of the brain, or what's happening during our resting state. In fact, it actually increases the density and thickness of the cortex. So it's not just brain function, it's brain structure. It seems really amazing that just paying attention to our experience in this non-judgmental, curious, kind, compassionate way for 20 minutes a day or so changes our brain. There's also some evidence that it affects our gene expression. At work, it helps with less emotional exhaustion, more job satisfaction, improved processing, working memory, executive functioning, and even some reductions in implicit bias, or the ways that people unintentionally treat other people differently based on the color of their skin or gender or other kinds of biases that they don't even know they're holding. So this idea that what we resist persists is an interesting one. It's not immediately obvious. This is what we call experiential avoidance, the attempt to try to avoid your experience. Very natural, especially when you're having very difficult experiences, physically, emotionally, mentally. It's natural to want to get away from it, but those attempts to get away from our experience, research shows now, are counterproductive. It's kind of like trying to get out of finger cuffs. The harder you try, the tighter they get. And then when you sort of relax into it, that's how you can remove them. And like I just talked about, this idea of the opposite of experiential avoidance or radical acceptance, it may not reduce the original pain or discomfort, but it almost certainly reduces the suffering associated with the pain. I want you to think about that for a minute. There is the original pain, there's the discomfort, and then there's the suffering on top of the discomfort, which is all of the stories we tell about it, how this shouldn't be here, being angry at ourselves, being angry at God, being angry at the universe, trying to make it stop. It's natural, it's totally understandable, but that resistance actually adds to the suffering. In Buddhism, they call it the second arrow. The first arrow hits, which is the original experience, but the second arrow is what we layer on top of it. And so this very paradoxical practice has to do with saying, this is what is, and I am simply going to be here with it. I am not going to fight it. I'm going to allow it. And when we're talking about this emotionally, one of the examples I like to use is, it's almost like, I don't know about you, but when I get very, very upset or worried or angry, it's like it fills my entire consciousness. It's like a balloon being blown up in a bread box. It takes up every inch of space. There's not much else happening. We feel this when we have pain, when we have worry, when we have grief. And so we're not really trying to get that balloon to stop blowing up. We're trying to make the bread box into the size of an airplane hangar so that we're still having this experience, but there's also a lot of other things happening in addition to that experience. And that's why when we practice mindfulness, being present, observing the distress or the pain or the difficulty, we are actually creating space between us and the difficult experience. And the more space we create between us and that experience, the less it takes up our entire consciousness. So I'd like you to think for a moment about your experience as a human. And almost every experience we have is some combination of thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. So I want you to consider that. Think of any experience you have, eating a meal or, all of the experiences you have in your life. Is there anything other than thoughts, feelings, and body sensations? It's kind of hard to find one. But what mindfulness teaches us is that, in fact, there's a fourth element of our experience, and that is our awareness. The awareness of the thoughts, the awareness of the feelings, the awareness of the body sensations. Our thoughts and feelings and body sensations don't define us. They are ever changing. It's like a constant stream of experiences. Our awareness, on the other hand, doesn't really change. It just knows about our thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. And so in some ways, when we're training in mindfulness, we're learning to reside in awareness as opposed to being completely fused with our thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. And our awareness is much bigger than any given thought or feeling or body sensation most of the time. So the more we spend time in that territory of awareness, the more we explore it, the larger it feels to us. So some of the qualities of awareness are that it's always in the present moment. Now you can think about the past or you can think about the future, consider it, but you're still doing that in the present moment. In fact, when you really come right down to it, the only time anything ever happens at all is in the present moment. The past is gone, the future is not here yet. The only time that we have any power at all is in the present moment. Yet it's interesting that when we do studies of what people are thinking about or focusing on, people spend an inordinate amount of time in the past or in the future, thinking about the past or projecting into the future. And so, if you imagine that people spend 60 to 80% of their time considering the past or projecting into the future and 20% of their attention in the present moment, what we're trying to do is flip that. So it's 80% of our attention in the present moment. And then it is important to reflect on the past and to plan for the future, but maybe only with 20% of our time because we don't have any power in the past or the future. So this awareness can be of thoughts, of feelings, of body sensations, or breathing. And I've brought up this word non-judging, non-evaluative many times. One of the ways to think about this is when you go outside and it's freezing cold or it's super, super hot. Most of us will be like, oh, oh God, ick, too cold, or oh, terrible, too hot. That's a good example of an evaluation. It's not good. Even when we're, waiting in line for something, we tend to be ticking off in our minds. I like this, I don't like that. And so that is a very good use of the mind. That's what one of the things the mind is really good at, is evaluating and categorizing, comparing, calculating. But it's not a great use of our being. And when we practice liberating ourselves from constantly evaluating everything as right or wrong or good or bad or on a scale of 1 to 10, and just let things be as they are, we find that we free up all this energy that was previously being channeled into this constant evaluation process. So awareness itself is really not judgmental. It's just like, oh, this is what's happening right now. Accepting and allowing are other words that I've used. And I don't mean this in a like, look on the bright side kind of way. It's not like, oh, sure, it's great. I'm just going to accept these things that cause me distress. I'm going to be a doormat. I'm going to allow myself to get steamrollered. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about meeting things as they are. When you really think about it, we might as well accept and allow things that are happening to be happening because they are happening. I know that sounds kind of crazy. I'll say it again. We might as well allow or accept or meet things as they are because they actually are that way. All of our ideas about not accepting it or allowing it, it's kind of silly. It doesn't mean you can't take action and say, oh, I really don't want things to be this way. I'm going to make a plan or a strategy for shifting this. But in fact, that doesn't really come from resisting the way things are or hating the way things are. It paradoxically comes from seeing things and meeting them exactly as they are. It's really hard to take action on anything if you haven't really seen clearly how it is. So when we live in denial, when you see friends and family members live in denial, they're not accepting what is, they can't make a change because they haven't accepted it. They haven't allowed it. They haven't seen it clearly. You really can only make change when you see something clearly. There's another flavor of mindfulness, which is non-striving. It's not goal-oriented. You're not trying to get anywhere. You're not trying to accomplish anything or make anything happen. You're simply allowing the never-ending, ever-changing flow of experiences to pass through your body, mind, and spirit, just to pass through you, not doing anything about it. I know for those of us who have been raised in a do culture, it's really hard to just be. But just being is what we're talking about here. We have a being mode, we have a doing mode. So we're just trying to balance the doing mode with the being mode. And finally, even though I say it's objective or non-judging, there is a flavor of this awareness that is essentially gentle, kind, and compassionate. That we see ourselves struggling with something, and instead of saying, you idiot, it's like, oh, okay, gosh, that's hard. That is hard. We're kind to ourselves. We're compassionate. We're gentle. It's like a good friend investigating our own experiences as though we really were a good friend to ourselves. There's a sense of friendliness, care, and compassion for our own experiences of difficulty, even if we created them. It's just like, oh, honey, you are tied up like a bundle of yarn. Let's see if we can sit with this and, allow it to start to untangle. So a great metaphor for this, and maybe we'll do another practice right now, is that your awareness is like the sky. And your thoughts and feelings and body sensations are like weather patterns in the sky, or birds, or whatever else we find in the sky. Your awareness is like the sky. It's infinite. It's essentially empty, but it's from time to time filled with this always changing bunch of experiences, clouds, storms, fog, hundreds of different types of weather patterns, lightning and thunder, hurricanes, tornadoes, sunsets and rainbows, weeks and weeks of rain. I hope that you can recognize some of these weather patterns inside yourself. But what you may not always recognize is that you are still the sky, even if these weather patterns are moving through you. If you've been in an airplane and you've flown above the clouds, above the weather patterns, it's always clear blue sky or clear night sky. So let's take a minute now to, you can close your eyes or leave them open, but soften your gaze. And I want you to imagine something that is really making you happy in your life right now. And I want you to also imagine something that is causing a lot of distress. I want you to imagine yourself as the sky, opening up your awareness so that it's broad and vast. And then this thing that's making you happy could be beautiful rainbow, beautiful sunset, lovely fluffy clouds, your favorite kind of weather. This happy content is moving through you as the sky. And now I want you to imagine this thing that is bothering you also as a weather pattern. If it's a really big thing that's bothering you, it might be like a hurricane or a tornado, or it could be just a thunderstorm. Rainfall. You might feel really confused, so there might be a thick fog. But you are still the sky. And if you can allow yourself to sit in the sky and have these weather patterns move through you, observing them, meeting them as they are, allowing them to be there, noticing what's happening for you right now in the present moment, not what's happened in the past or the future, or that you imagine might happen in the future. Non-striving, not trying to get anywhere, do anything, or make anything happen, or fix it, or change it, or hold on to it. And with a sense of kindness and compassion, it's really hard to have a massive storm swing through your life. Or if you're someone who loves rainy days, it might be really hard for you to have a long, dry, sunny spell that doesn't ever seem to end. So love yourself in that. Allow yourself to be the sky. Okay, and then you can bring light back into your eyes, opening your eyes and squeezing or getting yourself back into your body. So as I said, you can learn more about us at the Center for Mindfulness at UC San Diego. We also we have throughout COVID, and we continue to offer several free classes each week that you can drop in on and do mindfulness practice with us that are all online.